Hey, how's it going? I'm gonna be streaming a bit. Oh, I have 1,300 followers. 1,308. Fantastic. Thanks everyone who has hit follow. Much appreciated. Hey, Zalin. How are you? Me, I am a little bit tired. But otherwise good. So today, or tonight rather, at some point I will be doing paintovers for the 2-week challenge. I thought I'd start the stream earlier, so kind of have some time to sit and sketch a bit before starting. I'm still fiddling with this one. I'm not too sure about it. It's something with it that I'm not very happy about. Something that keeps bugging me a lot. So I keep going back to it and changing parts and repainting parts. So now I'm testing painting a second maze. Not sure though. Kind of works. Yeah, I think two mazes is it's good. It definitely helps with what I've been annoyed by. Reads for me a little bit better than without. But still, I'd like to still work on it a little bit more, tweak it, but it's still early. when you think of when I think about like finishing, level of finish. Sketches still. Hey Dado, welcome. How's it going? I should remove that. Time's up. There we go. I'll switch off topic. Extra stream. Let's see. Extra stream should say 2-week challenge. Yes. There we go. Hey, Epidemic Jack. Welcome. And you finally made it to a live one, Dado. Like I mentioned before, I'm gonna be sketching a bit, and then I will be doing paintovers on the 2-week challenge entries and give some feedback. I don't think I will do a very long stream. I feel a bit tired and probably a little bit ill as well. Everyone in my family has a cold, and I think I'm feeling it coming as well. It's always like that when you have children and one gets sick. It's like a wildfire. Everyone gets sick eventually. And you're lucky if you don't get sick. I've noticed lately there's this annoying small lag in my Photoshop. I don't know what it is when I'm streaming. Maybe some. Oh yeah, the kids definitely just keep on infecting everyone in a vicious loop. Like if you're not sick, send your kids to school, and you will definitely come. They will come back with some sort of disease. It's always like that. Yeah. So as I said, my energy level is a bit low. I think I'm getting the kids cold. My son as well. He's like super. His energy is very low. He was just kind of in a zombie mode all day. He's usually very energetic. So he's definitely go. My daughter was the one who I think brought it from her kindergarten. Hey, Babu 220. I definitely will do that. I will do my stream, and probably not that much more than the feedback and a little bit of sketching. And then of course after the stream I will post the next 2-week challenge. Hey Sayart, welcome. Kuru. That's weird. So strange. I wonder what it is. But maybe you don't even hear this. Hey, Thomas. Um, Meow, I'd say no. I think currently it's about the same, like every day. Usually we are around 30 people during mornings. I think my record is like 300 people at one time. Oh, so typical. I was like really happy with the way it is. Then I'm painting this hand guard. Like, repaint. Let's see here. Yeah. So without it, like the arm was before, I wasn't too happy with it. But now I find it better. Like it has more weight. Zoltan uh, Hegedus. Is it really a Kuru? Is Kuru really a brain disease? It is. For Papua New Guinea. That's hilarious. I wonder if he knew. Zoltan. That's hilarious. Oh, we lost some viewers. They didn't like my face. Now, now I will paint like a rock star. Whoa. The sunglasses are polarized. Makes the Cintiq screen look really weird. Looks like a rainbow. Almost like, you know, that blue and red 3D pass uh, where you have this fake 3D. Made it look like that. I don't know about you, but I concept like a boss with sunglasses on during nighttime. Not conspicuous at all. Raposa does Dave Raposa paint with sunglasses on. I'm assuming it's some sort of inside joke. Or is it some TV detective called Raposa? Or is it the guy that always takes them off and looks into the camera? CSI, whatever. Man, I've been thinking about my presentation a lot. And I think I got some pretty good ideas and how I want to do it. It's going to be interesting to hear people's response to it on the workshop. Oh, that is right. So it's Dave Raposa. Yeah, he likes those sunglasses, I think. There's this thread or discussion on Facebook about ArtStation's new algorithm for the main page, like which images are featured. And there's so many salty comments, so many complaining about like Horizon Zero Dawn art dump and how unfair it is and all these things. There's one thread on Dave Raposa on his wall. Really funny. I was reading it last night, drinking beer. Hey, Thomas Pazika, or Pazikaka. You should go home. You're drunk. Boo. You should be ashamed, Thomas. How dare you? How dare you show your face around here? Nah, Thomas is cool. Zealin, yeah. Well, I think it was like an organized upload. Like they gave the go-ahead to post, and everyone was waiting to dump. And then I think everyone that dumped art clicked on each other's art. The algorithm, more or less, like if you get 3 or more likes within X amount of time, like the rating or exposure algorithm, whatever, goes up and starts putting you on trending. Thomas, I know that you'd like to insult me. It's because you're shit. You're a shit person. I'm ashamed of being your friend. No. No, it's okay. I love you, Thomas. It's all good. Thomas is the guy I made my pixel game with. Me and him made it a couple of years ago. It's fun. Fun to do pixel pixel stuff. Oh, Dado, I haven't seen um, the polycount thread. Sounds like good reading material of lots of people complaining. Hey, Dylan Kujiro. No, he doesn't have his nips pierced. No, it's just kind of very, very crude chainmail. I was thinking instead of having a tightly linked chainmail, he just has like rings that if you would slice it, it would like just take most of the hit rather than having a full chainmail. Just increase the loops because he's the scale he's so big. You know, the amount of loops would be crazy. So I thought just space them out a bit. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, this is still just sketching and trying to solve things where I hate it. I'm not too happy with it yet. I'm just getting there, I think. Still very early on. I haven't had that much time. It was originally for the Lost Civilization Challenge competition on ArtStation, but I had to withdraw from it because lack of time. Thanks, Thomas. Epidemic Jack. Oh, you mean about the like how I treat the light? Yeah, it's something I've been playing around with a lot. And if you go back and look at the streams of the warm-up sessions, there's a YouTube archive underneath. There's a point where I start experimenting with that. If you want to see like the evolution of it, but overall, generally, it's something that I think helps to place the character in space. That's why I do it. It makes a lot more convincing form, and it also allows you to imply mood and material better. It's like like one step up from just rendering the form and specularity. You can also show like translucency and all extra layers by just making it more complex. Kuru, the plan is just I'll do some sketching. In a while, I'll start doing the paint overs of the 2-week challenge. Maybe I'll paint half an hour more, and then I'll switch over to 2-week challenge entries. And for those who don't know what the 2-week challenge entries are, is that on Discord, which is a link underneath the stream, there's a 2-week challenge. So every Saturday I stream and do paint overs of the entries that people have submitted, and every second Saturday there's a new theme or topic. It's just like a couple of sentences of some genre or scenario or something, and you guys have 2 weeks to do your best, and then after those 2 weeks I do a stream and do paint overs and give feedback, and so it goes on and on and on. I think today is the eighth 2-week challenge. Which is crazy. Which means we've been doing the 2-week challenge for 4 months now. Which is amazing. And some killer entries each time. So fun to see. And we got some new blood as well. And hopefully people will post it. I have seen that people are posting on Discord. Dado, by the way, people, Dado is a cool artist. He does this really cool kind of comic style. He has a really nice painting style. I assume if you Google Dado art, you'll get some results. Zialin, you should join. Everyone is at different levels at some point, you know. Not everyone is born good at art. And I promise you, by putting your best effort and then having me give you feedback, and the other people in the challenge give you feedback, you're gonna learn a lot. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and then you'll see when you go back to your first entry versus your third or whatever, you're gonna see a huge difference. And that's not like a long time span at all of like increasing your knowledge by just applying yourself and pushing yourself. And it's easy to say, oh, everyone else is so much better, and you won't improve because they are improving, they are joining. And if you want some good good feeling about it, go and look at the first 2-week challenge of the people submitting versus like what they were doing on the second and third. It's really cool. Thanks, Lazy Bones, for the follow. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Hey, Narvit. Welcome. So I think I'll be painting for like 20 minutes more. And then start doing paintovers. So now I'm just trying to find what I want to do or change while correcting some mistakes while thinking. And just pushing and pulling shadows and light in and out to get a better sense of form. I kind of want to make him look, I don't know. In my head, he has like hanging strips, or maybe it's skin or something that. Yeah, why not? Why not have it like that? Let's keep it like that. But I'm not happy with this lag. I don't understand it. Not at all. It makes me worried, like if someone has hacked me and like is using my my performance. That would completely suck. Thanks, Lazy Bones. All right, let's put on the timer. 11 minutes. No, 21 minutes. There we go. 21 minutes. Time's a ticking. Yeah, I kind of like these hanging things. It was somewhat what my mind saw. So excited to. I'm gonna switch off vibration on my phone. You guys are so happy, pressing retweets and whatnot. My phone is running hot, which is appreciated. It's good stuff. I'm actually good in my I think in my lecture on IFCC at the end of this month. I'm gonna talk about Facebook and the ArtStation. I think it's gonna have a quite big part, not a big part, but quite a big part of my lecture about not really that ArtStation is bad, but that it can be counterproductive. Because my talk is going to be about creativity and possible pitfalls and things to think about and what not to think about. So yeah, I like these hanging stripy things. It looks like some weird skin. Yeah. Good changes. Now I'm way happier with it than I was before. It was good edits. Oh, that reminds me, I will make a note out of that. It was the chair sliding on the floor. It's true, it's true. It's more or less one layer. I tend not to use too many. Uh, for professional work, uh, I tend to use layers because clients always want the character on a separate layer. So that's usually the first thing I do is just sketch the character out, cut him out, or cut it out, and then start painting on separate layer. But for in this instance, it's just me just painting, and I have no reason to have it separate. I tend to just do a new layer for safety. Like if I mess up too much, I can fall back. But I also tend to do, like, let's say I make a new layer and start doing big brush strokes, and then I erase some of the bigger brush strokes, the marks, so that I get what I want without losing the original paint. So I need to like repaint the section. But then after that, I tend to just flatten. Epidemic Jack. Yeah, the boat horn. I was out in the garden today, barbecuing and having a beer. It was really good, and you can see it on my face. Instant, instant start of a tan. That white guy drunk in the garden tan. Like you can see where the edge of the shirt is and the very dry skin. Bill Burr, stand-up comedian, does a really fun sketch about like white people versus black people, and that white people don't moisturize while black people do. This is hilarious joke or sketch or whatever you call it. That white guys are without sunscreen or anything, just with a sailor hat on in the sun. Man, you gotta dig it up. You have to YouTube it. It's super funny. I guess Bill Burr moisturizer or Bill Burr lotion, maybe. Kuru, yeah. It's the Finnish jeans that keeps you from getting a tan. For some reason, I skipped that. Which I'm glad. But my wife has very delicate skin, and my son has inherited that type of skin, the one that doesn't tan that easily and it's very fair. While my daughter, I think, has like a lot more skin type like me, where she tans very easily and always has a few shades darker than the brother. It's funny that like how humans are so different in the chemistry, even though it's the same kind of human. I mean, in a lot of animals, there's differences as well within the same family. Oh, really, Kuru? Do you speak Russian? I think my Finnish grandmother told me two things in Russian. It's like the only thing I know. And then I picked up a couple of words here and there, but Russian is completely alien to me. I don't understand. I don't understand that language at all. I just know the classic curse word that all the gamers use, that you see in any video game stream. It's just that over and over again, which is hilarious. The gaming community has a very specific type of humor. Oh, that's pretty cool, Cora. Yeah. I think everyone knows how to say yes and no in Russian. I think that's like the most basic thing everyone learns. My wife knows Russian as well, and she says like that Russian has such good curse words that there's not really like so many nice and subtle nuances in curse words in Russian versus other languages. That nuances that you can't translate. That it's just only works in Russian. Say art, yeah. Paintings like these, I mean, you can steam through them rather fast. But for me now, I'm just enjoying the process rather than chasing the end result. I could definitely pick up the pace, but I don't feel like it. I feel like I can easily sit here and slowly noodle the painting, but it's not interesting for you. And I love working zoomed out. Like you don't need to always zoom in. I mean, you can do that later. Hey, Novio. Thanks, Dado. Much appreciated. Let's zoom in a little bit. There we go. Here's 100%. Not very high res. Let's throw a little shadow on here. I don't know how much time I would need to finish it. Maybe one working day. 1 or 2 more days. Just sitting and tightening the render up where it needs to be tighter and fiddle with post and probably a day or two. And I should have upped the resolution before starting to render, but it's a bit too late for that now. So I'm kind of just, I mean, this is 100%, so I would have liked twice the resolution, so you can get in and add the details where they're needed and let other people be more suggested. But now it's going to be a little bit I don't know, I like painting in high resolution. You can be a lot more suggestive with your brush marks. I find that the lower the resolution, the tighter you have to work with the pixels. They tend to stiffen up a bit. Novio, I'll have a look. It's 4,500 times 4,000. I would have liked like that resolution. So just up it to 200. So I paint around 10,000, maybe. Because you allow yourself to have a little bit of wiggle room then with how dense your pixels are. And the other, like these little details with straps and so on, I've talked about it on my streams. It's about design. It's about a rhythm of calm and busy areas with in regards of where you want the eye to look, and having like hotspots of information versus calm areas. Because if you try to have equal amount of details across the design, not just image but the design, it's gonna be hard to follow. It's gonna be hard to like understand where you should look. So by dictating the rhythm and dictating the amount of details at certain spots, you can easily have the viewer look at details and get impressions of your designs in a more controlled manner, like where I want you to look and where I want you to look next. All these things you can help adjust the eye for, or help push the eye to look in these different directions and different locations, depending on like where do you put higher amount of details versus lower amount of details. So it's all about just complete randomness. It's deliberate, like thought process, where you know, I'm looking at the painting and thinking, where should I add more details? Where does the design of the character need more or less information? So it's not really random, it's deliberate. Hey, Darth Smork. Thank you very much for stopping by and sharing some love. And welcome, Infinite Divide. So I think it's starting to become time to do paintovers, the 2-week challenge. So I'm hoping that you guys will stick around. We got 30 people viewing, but I have a sneaky suspicion that possibly a lot of people will drop off when I start doing overpaints of other people's work. But we'll see. Hopefully not. Hopefully you guys will stick around and talk about other people's art. Right. Let's. I'm going to be looking at the design challenge thread. I see Kuru posted. He posted an unfinished thing. Let's see here. Let's scroll up. I might as well show it. Of all the good people's what's it called? Effort. I might as well. I'll scroll to the top. Oh, here we go. All right. So this 2 weeks challenge number 8 was called the Assembly. He stood before the assembled dignitaries, his ambassadorial robes hanging from his frame, as he prepared to give the first speech representing Earth before the Galactic Imperium. If only Earth knew that aliens existed. That is taken from like a one-sentence sci-fi story website. So it's not me who written it, someone else. Yeah, Kuru and Dado, we'll see. Well, hopefully they will stick around. So we see Nefaz, he was quick through the gates. Sayart as per usual. Onizuka is a new member, so it's great to see. You know, a lot of people giving feedback and suggestions and so on, which is always great. I wonder if Henrik West updated again. If not, that would be his entry then. Say are doing loads and loads of thumbnails, which she does really, really well. Let's see here. People painting, talking, giving feedback. Oh, this is a new guy as well. Babu. Laszlo Huckle. Let's see. Onizuka. All right. that seems to be the end. Okay. Okay. Open original. There's Babu's. Really cool style. New member. I think it's the first 2-week challenge from him. Sayart. Oh no, that's the one from Sayart. Come on. Character design thumbnails from Kuru only today. Okay, I think. Let's see. Oh, it's the same, but just kind of block out. All right, I'll open them in Photoshop. I'm also gonna have to look up the names. Usually we add the names. I think I gotta add that as a note on the next one, so that it's always, you guys always add it. Epidemic Jack. Yes, it's underneath the stream window. You just click it and you'll join. Tons of people doing cool stuff, helping each other out. And it's a good little crowd of people. All right, so let's start. So here's Eric Movies. I don't know if you guys see it, if the resolution is good enough, but yeah, let's have a look. I think overall, when we look at the designs, obviously there's no value design here, so we have to just look at the line art. But for me, the ones that are the most striking is like his head design. This guy as a whole, and this character as a whole, they are really, really good. They read well, but the biggest problem on all of them, absolutely all of them, is that a lot of your lines, they go like this, just wobbly lines for the sake of wobble. You see? It doesn't make any sense, and it shows that there's a lack of knowledge in fabrics. I can see that you've been trying quite hard, but what you got to do is just do more studies of fabric. What you can do is go and take different kinds of fabrics that you find in your home and drape them over a chair or a table, or hang them off the edge of the sofa or whatever, and draw them and look at them and try to figure out how thick is the fabric, because thickness is hints of a fold width. Like silk folds super small, like the folds are so thin, versus like wool cloth has big bulgy folds. Uh, so the biggest problem is that all fabrics are more or less treated the same way and the same incorrect way, which ruins the illusion of different materials, and also the way the folds act, that doesn't feel believable. And another thing with usually with anatomy, which is a kind of standard thing that you learn in life drawing, is that, let's say on an arm, the shoulder and the bicep and the lower arm, they are never equal on each side. And if you look carefully, and a lot of humans especially, I mean obviously in this case, like it's like it's never, they're never even. One starts always higher up on one side or the other side, so that it becomes this rhythm, because super symmetry, like in muscles, etc., and in the body, it's not good. But each side of the body is symmetrical, but the way the all the muscles are aligned and so on, they're never equal on both sides. They're always offset, so it becomes like S shapes. And I can see a lot of that in some of the, especially the made up anatomy. It has that kind of mirror bubbles, and it makes it look awkward and not real. I think, like I said, these two are really, really good. The design of these are great. One thing I notice is proportions as well. They're a little bit awkward. I know they're aliens, but there's some innate awkwardness in your ability or understanding of anatomy. Looking at the design, I love the kind of layered necklace, the silhouette of the horns and the face. I really like these with the straps coming up and guiding the eye through the character. I think it's a little bit too much here. I like this idea, but the way that the fact that there's a skirt behind it makes it look unpractical. It makes it look like it would itch or chafe the knee thing. It doesn't feel like that's the way they would wear it. They would probably have maybe a slit going up, and so that you could have an enhance the way we look at the knees, rather than just intersecting it. Same goes for this guy. It's very symmetrical in the design, but it's one of those designs that work really well because it has a vertical asymmetry. Like it's not even with the rhythm of what you're placing things up and down. But sideways it's very symmetrical, but it's okay. I think this one has lots of character, great pose, cool staff. Staff we're seeing a little bit too much head on. I would have liked it a lot more if the staff was in perspective. A lot of people have staffs though. That might, might need to change that. Like 3 staffs out of 6 people, so half has staffs. But I think it's cool. Another thing is, watch out with feet. If you draw them flat like this, you're flattening the perspective a lot. Always try to put the foot in perspective. It'll look a lot more natural. Yeah, there's some really cool elements in all characters. I think this one is a little bit overdone, a little bit of just randomness, and it doesn't flow together, and his arm is too long, and his super high waist. It doesn't feel right. A lot of the shapes and lines, it's Darth Vader-y, mixed with just the shape language changes too much. It doesn't feel consistent, while these two feel very consistent across the character. This guy I'm not so keen on with the zigzag and the circles. I feel like it needs something more in order for that design to work. You know, there could be like a second layer maybe to help push the emptiness of that part, the simplicity of that versus the kind of heavy details down there. I would just try to maybe bridge some extra shapes there so that it doesn't feel so alone. All right. I think that's enough for who was it? Eric Mui. All right. Let's go to Kuru. So he designed the human that's gonna do the talk. I think at first look, when you're doing thumbnails, and it's the exploratory part, I'd say it's very important that you always try to vary everything, and not only like changing the shape of something. Like if you look at all the colors, they're all different, but they all have the same proportions, more or less. Oh, definitely, Kuro. Eric's character, he mentioned that he was thinking about Star Wars, and I think they could be, but Star Wars has great character designs, and all of them doesn't really sit there. I think these two would definitely be able to fit, and this guy with a little bit a stronger design, and so. Oh, too bad, Eric. But you're gonna have it recorded. So. Yeah, so let's see what Kuru wrote. Where is it? Just scroll past it. Ah. He had technical difficulties. That's fine. Yeah, as I was saying, when you're doing thumbnails and exploring, it's good that you're changing. Let's say you see these are different, the sleeves, and it's a good thing that they vary a lot more in placement and size. Also, that here's clearly two layers, here's almost just one layer. I think that is a great thing, good thing to do variety on. But a lot of them have the same shape, for example. You know, you could have easily tried, what if it's just a circle, triangle, having triangles, you know, take the variety further, and like here on this hanging flap, it varies in length. That's good. it varies in silhouette. That's good, but it's always the same rectangle. And one thing that's worth exploring when you're doing this is play with the shape, play with proportions in between the thumbnails, because if you give them this like a narrow scope, you're defining a lot of things that the client might not enjoy looking at, and a lot of them have the same cut. So I'm just saying, like, when you're doing variations, even though you're saying that you're starting to experiment more with patterns, but the fact that you did change elements, you have to change more. You know, it doesn't take that much extra effort to change the buckle. Like, all of them have the same buckle except this guy. But, you know, that being said, let's look at them a little bit closer. I think with patterns and so on, one thing that's worth playing with is how you cut a shape and how you play with it. For example, all the characters, they all have the rim lit with a different pattern. You know, what if you know that he has a line going out from the arm or from the neck out to the arm. You know, like that is the pattern. Like that's the change, right? In for this instance, it does change everything up. It changes things and how we perceive the shapes. You know, you could have let's say extended the these rays, for example, going further, and have one maybe hugging that edge, and it changes up completely how we look at it. And it's the same treatment, just different pattern on each place. And I know that if professionally, you should try to add as much variety in between them so that they can more clearly pick one out, instead of having to decide which pattern do I like at that, because it's the same placement of the pattern on all. So then it stops them from making a decision that's broader and faster and easier to make, because they can say, I like that pattern, like that edge treatment, but the way it's applied on number 4 or whatever. So that's an easy fix to do, but the more you're aware of it, the easier it is to remember it. And another thing, when you're doing very horizontal splits in patterning, you're cutting that shape up and you're separating them into like subgroups. And that's why it works really well with belts and so on, is that you're splitting the upper part from the lower part, and you're making it more a visual separation. And one thing that's interesting, or I think is good, but you could have played a lot more with, is the kind of diagonal lines going down like that. You know, there's scope to play around with it a lot more. You know, what if the character is asymmetric? You know, maybe he has mirrored asymmetry. You know, you could have patterns like that. You know, who says that it needs to be so arranged? And the fact that you could have thrown that option out there would have increased the chances of a decision or of finding something that's cool. And also, I think variety is great with the cape, but I think it would be worth also playing with like options of maybe things hanging down in front, or asymmetrically. There's room to play more, and the more you dare to elaborate shapes and placement and so on, it becomes more and more of a character rather than a uniform that's like constricted. Even though you have advanced patterns and advanced shapes, the fact that it's just so balanced reduces personality. And I understand that if it's a ceremonial gown, etc., there's lots of symmetry, but there's always room to make it personal or have something that offsets the symmetry, like emblems or a necklace or things, that switches things up slightly. But it's good explorations. There's some really cool solutions. They feel quite medieval. It could have been worth, maybe making a statement with that. Is like is he like Merlin? Is he actually in medieval times talking to the aliens? Or is he in the future? At the moment, he looks way more medieval than futuristic. So if you want him to be in the future, possibly, he could have, AR stuff or something that indicates time. Because if we're looking at these, he could easily be in a fantasy game rather than a sci-fi game. You could also have varied, his haircut, facial hair, so on. But it's some cool patternings. I mean, the risk with doing a lot of patterns is that you're also creating a rhythm that is very high contrast. For example, like the patterns on this hanging cloth, if we would reduce the contrast, we would still read the pattern and it wouldn't take over. And the problem is when it's very busy is that it doesn't read well. It just becomes noise. So what's important to think about is to group information with the contrast in mind, so that when you do, let's say, look at the character, you see, like, I wouldn't say basic, but you see the fundamental grouping of values. And then at the second look, you're starting to read all the details, unless you want the contrast to be high so that you do look at it. But like if I erase away now the center of this, we're looking at the patterns in the center of the character. But biggest problem is always when it becomes Contrast, battle of contrast. But overall, I think it's some really cool stuff, good explorations, some sound designs. I think number 5, or actually 6 there, and 4 are probably my favorites, with the hanging things from 2 and the sleeves of 1. Let's see. Like that. Yeah. 4 and 6. Cool stuff. So here we go. This is Sayart. And it's some crazy stuff. And I think it's Sayart himself, if I'm not mistaken. That's the space guy. So I think Sayart has been channeling his inner Ohms. Oh, really, Corey? It's supposed to be Earth. Okay, I get it. Some what's it called? Some old, like, church-style symbol. So let's see what Sayart wrote. My pleasure. Oh, he didn't write anything. I think the biggest problem is that the light is slightly flat, much like Kuru's problem with patterning and that's all grabbing attention. Is that there's no clear separation of light and shadow, or placement in this world. Plus the palette is quite crazy, it's quite wide. So if we grayscale it, you know, we should see just that, like, the light is just all over the place. One thing that's very important to think about is that which part of the image is the main part. What other parts can I put down one step in intensity or detail or things, so that when you look at it, you have a much more clearer and arranged hierarchy of what is important and what is not important. Like, if you're looking at the values, it's very high contrast there, and a lot of contrast there and here, and on these things. You know, maybe that's not where you want us to look, and then this area is also very high contrast, and maybe that's not your idea of where you want us to look, right? You want us to look at the human telling the story, and the aliens are the co-stars, right? They are important, but not as important as the human. So first, by just knocking down some of the darks and some of the light, and starting to try to make the kind of hierarchy of focal points much more defined and much more clearer, so that when we do look at the image, we don't need to guess what's happening. You should be guided. You as the painter should guide the viewer where to look by defining focal points, by making sure that that the values and so on are not too crazy, that they make sense. Grouping grouping the shadows and lit areas, so that they don't become like exploded with their own local contrast groups, so that when we do look at it, the picture as a whole, we see all the forms, we see all the highlights, but each character doesn't have its own full value range of dark versus light, and indifferent to each other. Like, they are all standing in the same location, and some of these aliens have so much highlight in them, and shadow in them, that it's almost like they're self luminescent. You know, that they're so bright, they're so high contrasty, that I don't know. I don't know how to continue on that statement, but it's just too contrasted. There's not enough balance. And if you look at these more complicated scenes from, you know, like the old masters and so on, they really put a lot of time in how the light is, where are shadows, where are highlights, and they don't have. There's no shadows in space. It's true. That's a fact. Um, where were I? Yeah, they're spending a lot of time with light and shadows and grouping them together, so that they read uniformly. And if you remember what I talked about a couple of two-week challenges back, was I showed a Caravaggio painting, and I talked about the rhythm, like black, dark, white, dark, bright, dark, bright, throughout the painting, in where in this painting it dictates like the rhythm horizontally, where there's points of interest. And I think in your painting, in this instance, it's really hard to find a rhythm looking at your painting, and it just becomes chaotic. So what I'm doing, one of the things I'm doing, is I'm trying to establish that a much clearer rhythm between the darks and the shadows and the highlights, or the shadows and the lit areas, so that when we do look at it, it becomes a lot more uniform and together. And like what Kuru said, there's no cast shadows, which is it's quite an important thing to place them in the world. If there's no cast shadows, there's always a tendency for them to feel pasted on. And another thing, I think, if you knock back some of the whites and push them back in where we really want the focal point to be, we should start seeing a much clearer like hierarchy of where we should look. I'm also going to tone down that glass. It has way too much luminance. So just I think with these quick changes, I think we should already start having a much stronger read. So let me no. And it definitely, the problem is that he treated the characters separately and not standing in the same location. And it's a tall order to deal with. And I think you were very brave to do it. It's just that you got to be a little bit more economical with it. You have to make it a little bit smarter and not treat each character as a character design, but be more suggestive with the details and not showing everything perfectly, because it doesn't matter really about the aliens per se, that they have to be perfectly designed and explained, because the story is that there's a bunch of aliens. We will read them, we will look at them, but they don't need to just be so production art defined. You can leave a lot of things to imagination in shadow and so on, because it's not the point to see all the aliens perfectly. It's about seeing the story of the illustration, right? Because you opted for illustration rather than design. So you got to take that idea correct way then if you're going to do an illustration. But I think it's a really cool image. If we switch off the crazy palette, god damn, those colors. It's just all over the place. I think it's brave of you to try, but you're having the same issue like Alms had at the beginning, where just it's too wide. Let's try this thing. Let's put it to luminosity. So it helps with readability when it comes to the values, but it's still, the colors are just, it's a bit too crazy. A fun thing to do is you have red, green, and blue on these sliders, so you can go in and separately tweak each kind of channel. So if you find that, oh, it's like the blue is too blue, and up here is all the highlights, how much blue should be in the highlights, or if in the lower registry, if you want more blue in there or less blue in there, you can easily go in and tweak that. So most of the times when you have a too wide palette, you can easily just go in and do subtle changes. And if you don't want it to adjust the values of your painting, just set the correction layer to color, and you're not going to change the values, just the hues. But yeah, you got some crazy colors going on. I think it's also like there's lots of different ones scattered across the painting, and the like the choice of purple and so on is not um, it's too wide. Alms would definitely be proud. Um, I'll show you just as a reminder, because we talked about this on the 30-minute warm-ups. But your problem, like, is that your gamut, you know, is like that almost, or like that. You know, is like throw every color in there, aren't just and that's the biggest problem, is that it just there's no hierarchy. And with a gamut mask, and if you would limit the colors a lot more, you would have more scope to create something like more coherent. And this is, you can always try to add like photo filters, like Kuru suggested, to harmonize it. But the risk is also that you tend to um, muddy things up, because it's a fundamental mistake, right? Because he's just used too much everywhere. And if you would just look at the colors on the characters themselves, like this. Um, it's very, like, each segment of the alien is designed, or have color designed to not be as a group. All colors and values are stacked so that they separate each other from each other. There's no harmony between them. There's all very contrasting, very high contrast, very separated, so that we don't blend any form with the next form. It's all just like high contrast rhythm, which makes it really hard to balance. Even let's say you put photo filters on top, or you do these changes I suggested, it's still that fundamental problem with that kind of contrast of what's been applied. Hey, Blind Coyote, welcome. I think that's enough for him. Who was this Nefas? It was Nefas. Pretty cool. I think this was Nefas' first 2 weeks challenge. It's a good attempt. There were some people giving some good feedback. For me, it's a little bit hard to understand the narrative here, and who we should be looking at, and who is important. That being said, if you look also at the painting, it has some flaws with perspective and anatomy and folds and so on, and light. It's minor. Its biggest problem is perspective and folds and light. It just doesn't feel correct. There's lots of too much high contrast, like folds, and a lot of them don't follow the light source and the mass they are on. You know, like the body. If it's incorrect applied light on forms that shouldn't receive that much light, and it shouldn't cast shadows that way, and so on. It's inconsistencies. And one good thing to correct that is like when you start painting the character, you know, she's standing there with that praying pose. Is that you should try to go from big to small early, right? So you think about where's the light hitting, which shapes, you know, which parts should be receiving the most light, where can I like fade it out because which part is blocking the other part. And the more you paint that way, the more elaborate the light is going to be, because you're going to edit your decisions as you go along, and as you're thinking about, okay, like how sharp should this edge be, because is the form turning quickly or softly around the shoulder, you know. Then you should define how sharp that is. And it all comes down to, let's say, a fold. If we make this section very very soft, the transition very soft, and without going higher in contrast, we're just selecting the local values and paint the transition, the gradient, sharper. We don't need to add more contrast there. We just need to make the transition turn faster, and which shows, you know, it's a fold, or it's a a sharp fold. The form is turning quite fast, and then you need to start thinking about form and light, and 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 by thinking about that early on, thinking about where's the light coming from, what's the forms that being lit, and by incrementally increasing the fidelity and coherency, I mean, of the light, you're gonna just have a lot more believable place or placement of the character and light. And the sooner, and in opposite, if you do it too fast and you just jump into rendering, you're rendering on autopilot and without challenging your decisions, and you're going to start going to default moves, default thinking of a fold, what a fold should look like, rather than how does this fold look like based on the light source in this unique situation. So that's something that was very visible in a lot of folds, especially on her arm and head. It's like autopilot way of adding the light almost. It's like you're trying to change it up and make it more correctly, but you can't break that habit. So that's that issue, which is prevalent, prevalent. Some complicated word. Obvious, or it's throughout the painting, that same issue. But I can see that you've been trying, which is great. You just need to think about that more. No, Datatronic, it's not the wine, it's the word. Prevalent. I need to know. Prevalent. How do you spell it? Prevalent. Prevalent. Frequency or dominant. There we go. So if you start your painting with those decisions in mind, you're going to have a lot more stronger brush marks. You're going to have a lot more coherent form. Everything is just going to read better. But I think, that being said, without focusing too much on the mistakes of the light and so on, I think her design is quite cool. I really dig the dark lines across the character. I think you over noodled her hair. There's too much high contrast banding down her hair. You can have simplified it a lot more, much like the feedback to Say Art, where the contrast, the local contrast is too high. It's not a global contrast where you take her in this location in consideration. You're just zooming in and making local contrast make sense rather than globally, and it shows, because we don't care about those nicely stacked details on her hair as a picture. It just becomes noise and an annoyance. While you can easily remove some of that, simplify it, create a more hierarchy in how we read it, and we're still going to read it as hair without needing to zoom in and super define each fold. The biggest problem I started with is is the what I mentioned in the beginning is like I don't understand the narrative and who we should look at. Like if you focus on the blue one, which is more contrast than the other ones, she stands out. Um, you know, which is cool. But then you should almost make a decision that she is the focal point. So all the other characters maybe can read more secondary, and all the contrast points and so on should lean back to her. But I think the biggest problem, or another big problem, is that she's so blue. It's like the problem Sayert had is that she stands out. This blue is just so in your face. I mean, there's nothing wrong, but I mean, I guess you want to show different aliens, but they're all wearing white, but they're not all wearing white because the third woman is not. Well, they are very similar, but almost not. So in a way, they should either all be wearing the same clothes with different skin, or have unique enough outfits to separate them visually so it's more obvious that they are not the same. I really like the orb in the middle. It's really cool. I think you could have played a lot more with the silhouette of the holder. Where in the way the light hits. Maybe the floor is a fancy floor. Maybe we can see like reflections of the holder, the goblet, or whatever you can call it. Maybe it's a mirrored floor. Maybe we can see the lady in the reflection, the pillars. There's lots of potential to enhance this painting. The sky the stars in the background. Maybe they can have color. Is it Mars we're looking at? Is it some completely different planet? You can start building the painting up a little bit more, in that sense that if you want her to stand out with the blue, maybe the planet they're really, really warm, so that she stands out even more. And another thing, the problem is that when you start to render with white light and black shadows, is always going to mute the palette quite significantly. So what I always try to do is like add some temperature to it. I mean, in this instance, I cooled it, but you might as well, warm it up. It's arbitrary. It's just but giving it a little bit more life, a little bit more complexity than just black and white, with some local colors on the characters, and it flattens the attempt. You have so much more scope as soon as you start to make the painting more complicated. But the biggest and the most important is what decisions are you making and why when you do a change or an addition to the painting. If it's just arbitrary decisions, you really need to think, what do they do? Why am I adding this? Because it's like you're baking in a cake. If you just throw peanuts in there when you're making ice cream, you should consider like, what's the reason I'm putting peanuts in my ice cream? Because it goes well with cheese. Who knows? But just random things doesn't end up a good. It doesn't make a tasty dish. You got to consider what you're putting in and how can you make it work. Even if you put in random ingredients, you have to consciously think, okay, what do I need to do in order for this to make sense? And it's the same with painting. It's like, okay, so you're adding these elements. How can you change them? How can you present them? How can you treat the whole painting so that all these elements make sense together? Hey, sofa strangler. Traumatage. Yeah, it's a really good placement of the characters. You bounce around. There's vertical lines. There's the sphere. We keep circulating in there, and this big circle, small circle of the planet. It all makes sense. It all reads really well. So it's a really good start. My only confusion is the narrative, like I mentioned. Uh, but it could have been explained with more paintings as a series, but it's a little bit hard to just understand that kind of the clear message. But that being said, it's a cool painting. Um, yeah, too bad about the stream hanging up. I really don't know how to fix that. Okay, so new person, which was Babu Lajlo. Well, good thing it's an easy name to pronounce. I think it's Babu 220, if I'm not mistaken. Laszlo. All right. I think it's a really cool painting. The light and all these things has a really good coherency. Some of the problems, though, I have is her. Um, the focal point, like she's looking, her head rotation like that. The shoulders are and chest is like that. Her hips are like that, and then she's standing on that line. It it makes her skewed. It doesn't make her feel like she's doing something, leaning or rotating. The biggest problem I think is the chest area, because her head placement completely fine, but she's rotating her head while the collar isn't attached to her head, it's attached to her shoulders, but they feel more like they all just kind of go together without really any separation. So they merge a little bit too much. Same with the chest, and I think the problem is this part, that if she has her shoulders forward, I would have banked one shoulder back a little bit more, or forward a little bit more. So it would probably be something more like that. Even though it's a minor adjustment, it'll have a better rhythm. and possibly move down that shoulder slightly, just ever so slightly. And also, I think she should be a little bit further down, have a little bit more length. I think this is the original. I would reduce the contrast on his foot. There's no point in reading that so perfectly. I think what you should focus on is temperature there rather than contrast. The line going like that flattens the arm and it makes it confusing. It's really hard to understand the curvature, and I would pay a little bit more attention to the intensity of the green, because you don't want to detract from the focal point, which is the interaction with his hand on the shoulder, and the arm itself is not important, because that interaction is the thing that sells. It's a focal point, not the snaky arm. And I think what helps is just kind of focusing in the light a little bit more. I hinted that in on Discord. I said the light needs more work, and it's just subtle changes that'll enhance the way we travel around the painting. You know, she's there, she's being lit, her hand poking out. If you go back, I can find that Caravaggio painting again, because I keep on referencing it. But it's a very obvious painting, and he used this technique quite well. Let me. So this famous Caravaggio painting, if we look at like threshold, let's just move it like that, so we can see like dark, white, dark, white, dark, white, dark, white in different lines, vertical lines, dictating like focal points and how we're reading and how we're circulating around the painting. And the most intense stacks of black and white is at the focal point, which is Jesus, I think, or the dude getting a finger in his ribs, which is, I assume, is Jesus. So that being said, looking at her, this is my painted version, but it's lacking that rhythm. It's lacking that that extra layer of focal points, extra layer of look over here, move your eye this way, you know, and by just being a little bit more aware of the rhythm and details and how we're supposed to travel around. I know that you posted your compositional sketch analysis, like how you wanted us to look at it. I think that's great. The more you're aware of it, the stronger you're going to do it. But it's all about, like I talked about with Sayart's painting, it's like grouping that information, right? It's about the local contrast needs to not dictate the rhythm of the painting. Like we have to take the painting as a whole into consideration first, and then we read the local contrast point areas as secondary or third, tertiary. Is that what it's called? Man, my English today. And by just also making sure that all the decisions you're making are calculated and thought through and balanced. It's just in the long run, big picture wise, just going to read a lot stronger. And I was very happy that you added this screen after my feedback about light, because the side of the chair was really messing with the flow of the painting. It's a fantastic painting. I really love the colors. I really like it that you decided to join the two-week challenge. It's great to have newcomers. Hopefully people will learn from you as well, and the same as you will learn from others. It's a great group of people on Discord. One thing that I always find important is that contrast between places is so important to be dealt with as a whole and not at the local level. And the blue on the red, it doesn't make sense. If you look at blue light on red clothes, it can't go that blue. It's going to be like gray in the middle. Red just can't turn that blue. Infinite divide, yeah. Tertiary. I'm important. The screen is really cool. It's really good painting. I really like it. It has a really nice feel to it. It's like almost like classic sci-fi. But it's definitely not classic sci-fi. It's unique. I like it. I dig the colors. But yeah, so my changes are not dramatic. It's just more subtle, and it helps dictate the pace, how we read the painting more. I mean, you're obviously a good painter. I don't need to go into more details, minor adjustments, etc. That's stuff you're gonna figure out yourself. But I'd say the biggest problem was just that the flow with the rhythm of shadows and light is a little bit too high contrast. We get lost in the narrative. My changes, I wouldn't say is like the principle of them is what's important, and how you apply them yourself rather than just copying my application of them. I would definitely, if I would spend more time on it, I would do a lot more changes, a lot more tweaks, and so on. But I think the changes I've done so far are the more important ones. Just minor balancing. Some really cool designs. I really like her outfit. The folds are great. This big robot in the back is really cool. I think this guy in here, he's a little bit too chaotic. We don't read him. He merges with the chair. Um, and these guys over there, they're also a little bit lost. Maybe give their eyes a slight different color or something. I think maybe what you could also do is give the robot a face, because without the face the emotion is lost, and because he shows passion or compassion by resting a hand on her shoulder, we are looking for the reason, and if you could show that in a robotic face or so on, I think that would be good. A lot of them are quite expressionless. They don't have a mouth. So I'd say try to at least show at vital focal points a little bit more personality or behavior in their expression. All right, I think that's enough. So this is also a new contributor, and that is Onizuka. I have no idea how to say it. That's how I say it. Right. I think this is really cool. It's everyone decided to do alien meeting, which is cool, except Kuro, who did the uh, design of it. Um, and I like the idea that they are in uniform, a human is not in their uniform. He's separate. They're reading stats, probably why they should or shouldn't kill Earth. And I assume that's Earth in the background, or their planet maybe. But we can clearly see characters. I think the placement of them are pretty cool. But I find the painting lacking a little bit of contrast. And when you increase the contrast, it also shows the problem of the painting as well. And it comes also back to like stacking the light and dark through the painting. It's again very locally lit. There's no real focal point. There's no clear focal point. Um, like if they're sitting here and the highlight is hitting the table, uh, you know, dictates that we should be looking over there. Why are we seeing the characters so clearly? Or maybe he's ballooned with light in the from the table, and this foreground character is sitting there being uh, I don't know. Maybe he isn't vital to the narrative, and we could easily just hint him more than having him just as much screen space as the other things. Obviously, we want to look at the human, and secondly, we want to look at the interaction. And a lot of people make the mistake of not having the light as a global entity, that they locally just assert the light rather than saying this table is shiny or reflecting light. All things should be affected by it, and who was this? Onizuka done the same. Like this form is being lit by the bounce light. This form is being lit by the bounce light. But the space in between the table and the arm is not receiving any of the treatment, and it just becomes high contrast, awkward rhythm between them. And I'm not saying like blur everything or wash everything with the same light, but you have to consider where you want the eye to look and why and how. And the best way is to just make sure, for example, your light is coherent, um, materials are acting the way they should be acting, uh, but most of all, compositionally have a plan so that when you do changes, the changes are not arbitrary. They are thought of, and and they're a conscious decision of I need to do this change because I want you to look over here or not look over there. So, but I always say like the more you know, the more you're able to make a educated decision. Even though you don't know it perfectly, or you're all knowing wizard, art wizard, the fact that you are aware of it and you know that I should probably be more careful of light or values or whatever, you're just going to think about it more, and in result be more aware of your potential mistakes. Babu 220 and Meow. Yeah, I know, but faceless robots don't have emotions. Faceless things don't show emotion, and that's scary. And a sympathetic hand on the shoulder isn't um, scary. I really like the idea of a planet there in the background. I mean, you could expand that even more, making sure that it has some space dust, and uh, maybe there's I kind of see lines going like this. So I was thinking, maybe there's a space armada, there's spaceships parked, making sure that the narrative is pushed further. So you understand, like, oh shit, they're definitely having a meeting, and this guy, he looks a little bit stressed, while these look like pretty badass space pirates. And I'd say it's the same feedback like for Sayart. The palette is slightly too wide. Um, I'd try to have a little bit more balance in the palette, even though it's not that bad. I think you just could slightly push it. Just small changes. Um, a lot of the same mistakes like previous people with folds and focal points and so on. But it's definitely a really cool painting. I think the narrative is very strong in this one. We understand what's happening without having to think twice about it, which is really cool. They feel like he started talking and then went, what the... Yeah, I think it's cool. A very nice, a new addition to the 2-week challenge. Hey, Dodotronic, good night, and see you tomorrow, maybe. Goodbye, Dado. Okay, and this was a request. Yeah, I don't even think Henry Quest. Yeah, he just sketched it, I think. But I mentioned to him was that the contrast is equal across the painting. What he could have done is like have it darker by the alien, and then having the contrast take more light as it goes further away, and probably have stronger separation between light and shadow at places to help with the focal points. I mean, it's a sketch as well, so you can only do as much with a sketch. I think that's it. That's all of them. As per usual, I think I'll post the paintovers, or maybe not. You can, if you want to look at them, you can look at the stream. I'm pretty tired, like I said, I had a long day. I'll post the new challenge tomorrow morning over coffee. Thanks everyone for coming. Have a great day or a good night, depending where you are. Thanks to each one of you who contributed to the 2-week challenge. It's so I can't tell you how fun it is to look at your entries and seeing all the different solutions and things like that. It's really, really, really cool. So thanks everyone for taking the time to do it. I'm really looking forward to what you guys do for the next one. I will, like I said, I will post a new topic tomorrow morning. And thanks for hanging out with me, all of you wonderful 25 people. All right, that's me finished for today. Have a good one. I'm going to bed.